Huh? Hey, I'm tryna win. I'm tryna win in the 716 and I'm making it big. I wanna live. I think I'm ready to.
Yo, what's good, man? It's the Easy Pinch Out Podcast with your one and only host, Glory Boy, here with our special guest in the building. I'm so excited right now because it took so many years to get here. It took a minute. And this is an amazing time to be alive, and I appreciate you for coming through because I know you're a very busy man. Like, you're very much busy doing a lot of things, traveling and so on, but you actually made time to be here so we can sit down and have this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. And before you introduce yourself, I just want to let y'all know, y'all go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to like, comment, and share this video. And let's go ahead and just introduce yourself. Tell the people who you are, what you do, and then we can start.
All right, you got it. I'm Tommy Champion. I'm the chief of Buffalo Police Department, B District, which is our downtown Buffalo area. I've been a police officer for about 17 years. I've also worked as a community outreach and community policing captain in charge of our community outreach. I've also worked as a lieutenant in several districts and also worked as a detective and a patrol officer during that time period, among other things. But I'm happy to be here.
What a resume.
Thank you. It's a little bit of
What a resume. That's amazing. I mean, let's just go back to the beginning of everything. Take back to your earliest memory throughout your childhood. So tell us more about that.
Oh, man, it's funny because most people think that you can't remember anything until you're about 3 or 4 years old. And I remember my first memory is actually being at my house with my parents and having one of our pet dogs playing with me in the floor and literally dragging my socks and my mom running over to grab it. But that was my first memory. I think the second memory I can remember is being around 4 years old and playing in the school playground for the first time, right? And meeting all the different kids of different diversity and walks of life and thinking that was the coolest thing ever.
Wow, that's amazing. So, and also, I mean, just mentioning the kids that you were playing around throughout your neighborhood. So can you describe just the neighborhood that you grew up in? How was the neighborhood? How's the environment for you yourself, just being a young kid, just running around and playing with your friends?
Oh, yeah. So I was, I primarily am a product of the east side of Buffalo, or East Buffalo, whichever you prefer, right? But when we grew up, it was always the east side of Buffalo. And for the most part, we lived in both the Fruit Belt and also in the Macaulay Gardens areas. And we also spent some of our time periods over in what is now E District, which is over in the University District on Berwyn Avenue. So most of it's been on the east side, but I've also lived a bit on the west side a bit later.
All right. And what were some of your favorite activities? I mean, as you're playing with your friends? Because me personally, when I was young, I always played soccer and so on. I mean, we called it football back home. And when I used to play with my older brothers and so on, they would always pick on me and make me the goalkeeper. I never wanted to be the goalkeeper.
Were you good at it, though?
I mean, by force.
Yeah, by default.
Yeah, I had to find a way to be good at it. But just you yourself, what were some activities, some of your favorite activities that you used to play with your friends at a young age?
Oh, yeah. For us, I think the biggest thing was football. American football is the biggest thing for a lot of us inner city kids. A lot of kids, it's football and basketball. Okay. That's always the dichotomy that you see that the kids try to really master in the inner city because they see all their heroes in those two sports often. So it's very popular. So we played a lot of street football and a lot of big football games. I remember we would set up big games right in the middle of the street and have to stop because of traffic every 2 seconds, but we didn't care. It was the most exciting thing that we could do. So I did that. Definitely a lot of football. I kind of took a liking to basketball here and there. Later on, I picked up tennis and things like that just because I liked the lateral movement, which kind of relied on some of the same skills that you build in basketball and football too.
And you're pretty much in good shape. I've been seeing you on your pages. Man, you grinding, in the gym 24/7, making sure,
Trying.
that's amazing. At your age too, just growing up and so on, and continue doing the same thing you were doing at the young age. It's an amazing, inspiring thing to see. So now let's just jump into family, because I know we're not gonna talk so much about the family and so on, because today we're here to talk about you, yourself. But just describing your family, how was your relationship with your family, parents, siblings, just growing up?
Oh yeah, so I have a lot of family in Buffalo, but for the most part, my main family was always just my mom and my sister. I have one older sister. She's a couple of years older than me. Shout out to my sister. She's also a corrections officer and also does real estate, so she's doing very well. But we come from a small, close-knit family, but we have a lot of branches to that family. So we're larger when it comes to the relationships that we have. But for the most part, growing up, it was a lot of us. It was that one little nucleus. My mom was a single mom for a big chunk of my life. My dad, and she divorced when they were younger. But there was no lack of love. We had a lot of relatives, a lot of family members who were always present, a lot of uncles, aunts, and things, and who kept it very active and who were very engaged in everything that we did.
That's amazing. Just growing up in that positive environment kind of like shapes you to become someone. Because going through all those obstacles, but at the end of the day, having some people in your family that's keeping that positive structure within the family is the most important thing. Because, nothing is perfect.
Right.
Nothing is perfect, and I understand that. So now let's talk about school, because, at a young age, you must go to school. You must go to school at least when you're 17, 18, that's when you can decide, okay,
Right.
I'm not trying to pursue further education, but just at a young age, how did you act in school? How was the school for you itself? And also, after you answer that, I have another question to follow up.
Okay. Yeah, for me, school, I love school. And there were time periods where even, we had a great family, but there were some times that there was some trauma there that we had to deal with at certain time periods in different walks of life. And school to me was always, something that I can enjoy, especially during the younger years, because it was the time period that you got to unplug from whatever was going on in your neighborhood, whatever was going on at home, whatever you saw that was happening. School was another place to be engaged, and you could meet other people from a social standpoint. You could be exposed to new ideas and new concepts, and it was also a challenge, right? And I think school was the first time that, some of my other abilities and proficiencies start to stand out, because you're exposed to these new ideas and these new challenges, right? So I learned that I could draw and I could do all these other things, and I think that I've forged good relationships with my teachers and some of my peers, en route to really mastering some of these things and really exploring some of these things.
School is always going to be like that. And if you taking school very seriously, like you said, because you liked it, you kind of get to find different things that you're capable of doing, either at a young age, that like drawing, playing sports, and so many more things. And also, like, in terms of like personal development, who are some of your role models outside of your home besides just inside your home? Because, a lot of young kids will say, oh, my dad, oh, my mom, but like, who are some of your role models at that time?
So outside of the home, first I'll say this: my grandma and granddad were the biggest impacts in my life. Okay. Like, they were just almost your typical American, Southern Baptist African Americans, came from the South. They came up here during, the time periods when we had a lot of industry, a lot of steel industry going on. There was a lot of moving and shaking happening in Buffalo at that time period, and they came up to take advantage of those opportunities. And my granddad didn't have much of an education, but he was able to start his own business. He actually saved his money, worked a lot of different side gigs and side jobs, and he was able to start his own business, which grew over time and grew into him starting other businesses. So growing up, I was able to see that and model after that, and that sort of set the precedent for my family. It became a family business. He opened up his own car wash, and he sold cars, and he bought a few houses and did other things, but he was always working, always hustling, always on his mission. And the man worked 7 days a week. He did not give himself a day off. He worked.
Man.
And that set the precedent for the rest of my family. So my family was just known as this like hardworking blue collar family growing up. So if I could pick someone within my realm, it was my grandpa. You know what I mean? There's no mistaking it. Seeing someone be able to accomplish that with little education and defy all the odds. And mind you, in the backdrop of some of the historical things that were happening in the U.S. at that time, it was not equal. You know, things were not fair and opportunities were not granted to African Americans, and he was able to make his own opportunity during that time while dealing with some of the racism and biases that were prevalent during that time period. So I got to give, him, as far as
Man,
top
shout out to him,
Robert
because
Scott, Scott's Car Wash.
a lot of people that make excuses really don't see that people back then were actually going through the worst things. Like that's when like you didn't have a lot of say so. You didn't have a lot of opportunity based on like what you just mentioned. Based on like whatever political thing or racial thing that was going on. But and also like in terms of like just your grandfather himself, what values did he insert into you that you continue to have throughout your daily life today?
I think that was it. That was the main thing I got from my grandpa, especially, was really making your work, your mission, right? Like he was, the car wash was his baby. That was what he did. He felt like that was his purpose, and he invested everything into it. And his work ethic was like it was out of this world. He wanted to see it through every single day. And every little thing that happened with the business, the buck stopped with him. He wanted to be involved in every aspect of it, and he wanted to make sure people walked away, being satisfied with the effort that he and his workers put in that day. And he didn't have the most intricate or most expensive technology. He didn't have a big safety net when it come to finances. Right. He made things work with what he had, and he did the best he could. And he would really, really care about the quality of the product that he put out there when it came to service. And I think that myself and my family has really taken that on. And even in terms of, doing things for the community, he very much believed in using the business to create opportunity for others. Like people that couldn't get jobs elsewhere, he would hire at his business just so that they had a means of making money. And he'd give back. He'd give back freely to community members and people in need. And he also was very big in the church. He's very involved there. He very, very much was a man of faith. So those are the things that really stand out about him that I think that my entire family was able to take on in our identity. And outside the family, as far as heroes go, I could say people like Muhammad Ali, always a hero, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, obviously. I read a lot. Frederick Douglass. There's tons. I can think of it even in entertainment fields and throughout athletic fields. I was looking up to Arnold Schwarzenegger for bodybuilding and things, and I was bodybuilding. And even people, modern day people who inspire you. There's a young lady from Afghanistan. She's a pretty big thing. I don't know if you ever read her book.
No. Actually, if you send it to me, I might check it out.
I Am Malala. It's a classic. I think a lot of schools actually teach about her.
I don't even recall, to be honest.
So she's a young lady. She grew up a young girl, and she was so into education that I
already know.
You know what I'm talking about.
I already know. Yeah, it's ringing the bell. But absolutely.
She fought for the right for her to be educated because she was in where she was living. Obviously, she was living in the Middle East at that time period, and people didn't want to see young women being educated. They didn't feel like women needed to be educated. Right. And she and her father were big advocates of education. It meant so much to her that they still tried to make sure they received education, even when some of the extremist groups came in to try to suppress them. They still kept going forward and advocating for education to the point where she was shot in the face as a child. And this young lady, eventually she was able to move. She wound up leaving the country. She wound up going to London, but she continued her advocacy and still does till this day. She's written several books, and she's continued, just being herself and being her best self. And she's written several books. She's done advocacy all throughout the world, done I think she's done some speeches for the UN and everyone else, but she's a big deal. And even though she's younger than I am, I believe, she's someone I look up to because of the amount of courage that she had standing for her convictions.
You know, one thing I like to see, like you just mentioned, just her story itself is like, no matter what you go through in life, if you're on a mission, don't give up.
Right. Right.
Just keep chasing, because you never know. Because right now, I believe she has changed a lot of other women's lives,
Absolutely.
And when you did mention her, actually, because in college, I actually did also a minor in women and gender studies. We actually learned about her. That's when it kind of rang a bell. And I was like, oh, shoot, I've heard about her before. And that's an important thing to actually see and look at. That perseverance, just never giving up, is the most... Like, it's one thing that a lot of people tend to lack sometimes if they're going through like the most hard things in life,
Resilience.
Resilience, absolutely. But now let's take a look at just career path itself, because me personally, I always tell people this because it's funny, like growing up, I've always told my parents, I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be an anesthesiologist. I'm going to be this. They'll be like, oh, my gosh. Like coming from an African home, it's like you say you're going to be a doctor. They're really happy. Like they're so much able to push you to become a doctor.
Right.
So when I went to high school, I actually changed my mind because I started taking all the physics classes and so on. I'm like, man, I'm too busy playing soccer and doing physics homework. That is just so difficult for me. And I ended up just switching majors. I went to college, did communication studies. My focus was on advertisement and public relations. And I also did some in DMA, digital media arts, and then minor in women and gender studies. And look where we are right now, And for you yourself, so tell us, what was your first career choice just growing up? What did you want to be besides just becoming a police officer at a young age?
I think my first real interest was science. I was really interested in all the sciences. The concept of chemistry was really interesting to me, even to the point where I was a biochemical technology major in high school at Hutch Tech, right? So it was still very much...
Wait. You went to Hutch Tech?
I went to Hutch Tech.
Me too.
Tech High.
I went to Hutch Tech.
I'm sure I was years before you were, though. Class of 2002. Where were
2002. Our class of 2018.
2000. See, that's a long time.
A long time, yes, sir.
But I'm happy to be around another Tech High graduate.
Yes,
that's
absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah, man. But the sciences were number one for me. Similarly, I got to high school and I was like, this is okay, but you're taking advanced courses of those sciences, and it starts to filter out whether or not you're really, really passionate about it or not. So I was able to graduate, and by the time I went to college, I was like, well, I was more interested in people than I was in science itself. So I think that shift started to happen. And, in my experiences growing up, unfortunately, I saw crime and I saw things happening. I saw family members and loved ones going through different things, as a result of crime. And I think that kind of stayed with me, right? And there were time periods where I think the police responded to things and incidents that I'd seen. And I was always, when they showed up, I was intrigued. And there were situations where I saw them intervene in situations where it could have gotten bad if they hadn't been there to intervene on those situations. Right. So I think that I kept a healthy curiosity about it, but it was probably in my subconscious at that time period. So I get to college and I major in psychology, right? And I think my passion for psychology became trying to understand some of the things that were happening, things that I'd been seeing every single day, both inside and outside, right? And I had the opportunity to do an internship my sophomore year of college. To the chagrin of my academic advisors, it was in policing. So we'd have to write little journals about what we saw that day. And I think that they had a different concept of policing than policing really was. Because when I started doing my journals to let them know what I'd seen that day, they became concerned because I was able to do ride-alongs and write about what I was seeing and observing that day on the calls. And of course, the academics who were responsible for us ultimately on these programs were now like, "Oh my God, like we gotta make sure that this is good for him." And there were times where we had to reassure them, like, "Listen, no, I'm all good. I'm safe. I was kept safe by the officers." But it opened my eyes to even more, And you really had a window into seeing, some of the things that you don't normally get to see as a civilian. Like, we think that we know what's going on in our neighborhoods, but when you're going call to people's homes and you're going to every, extreme situation that occurs in a day, it's a completely different perspective. And it opened my eyes to it. And I'll tell you, just being there and seeing the officers going from situation to situation, trying to help people in the worst times of their lives, really, really like made a light bulb go off in my head. Wow. I went back to school and I was like, that's it. This is what I was meant to do. I was dead set then at that point at getting, my PhD and becoming a psychologist and opening up my own practice at that point, and it completely caused a shift. And again, my academic advisors were not happy about it initially. And, and I love them. They supported me throughout the whole time period, even when it was tough to keep me in the internship. They ultimately let me stay in the internship because I was so passionate about it. So I have all the respect in the world for my professors at Duval College, one of which was Todd Walter, who's still there, and he's still a psychology professor there.
He's still teaching there.
Still teaching there. From time to time, we even talk, and I try to get kids from Duval to do internships here in Buffalo Police to provide the same opportunity that I had.
Right.
So, and it's been successful. It's been great. A couple of the interns have now become officers in this time period. So it's nice to be able to have that full circle moment where I was the kid seeking the internship, and now I'm giving the opportunity for them to get an internship.
To get an internship, right.
But it definitely opened my eyes to law enforcement, and it changed my outlook and my plan. And next thing you know, I was taking the police exam my senior year at the same time as my finals, and that was the start of my career.
Wow, what an amazing journey!
Yeah,
and I like how you kind of like put some life lessons in there, which I did actually take notes of that, because a lot of times we can go to school or we can try to do something because other people are encouraging us. They see us being so good at something, but not knowing that we have something that we're very much better at or we're very much passionate about within us. You wanted to do psychology, open up your own clinic, have a PhD. You had professors at your school out there just encouraging you. They were so happy. Oh, he's going to become this. But then you ended up shifting that career path and becoming a police officer. I mean, it did upset them a little bit, but at the end of the day, it's what made you happy.
Absolutely.
So just making sure that you do something that you're passionate about, something that makes you happy in life. It's something that a lot of people, sometimes I have conversations with them, they would tell me like, man, especially in our culture, just being African, they would say, thank God to my parents, but like some kids would say like, man, no, I'm going to become a doctor. My parents want me to become a doctor.
Right.
And they're stressing in school, because their parents want them to become a doctor, or the people around them want them to become that. So then when they finish having a job, it's like they're not happy where they are.
Absolutely.
So now let's talk about just your police career so far. What makes you happy just being a police officer today and serving the community?
In this particular role?
In this particular, not this particular role, just when you started. Sorry.
Oh man, and I asked that specifically because it's changed, throughout the 17 years that I've been employed. As your responsibilities and your job title and your job role changes, right? As a patrol officer, I was really good at investigating, right, and locating, individuals who committed crimes and, trying to, work with them to try to get them to resolve whatever the matter was and come to talk to a detective and, get things sorted out. And I think that sometimes people think that always has to be a contentious thing, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to. And that's why, it's so important to communicate and establish rapport with people and help people understand things. And that way it doesn't, it kind of can mitigate, some of the negatives that happen as a result of, you carrying out your duty essentially. And I think people respect and appreciate that. So I was very good at that, I think, as a patrol officer especially. And I was very prideful about that, especially there were certain situations that really, or crimes that would happen that I really took an interest in, because of, what was alleged to have happened, or the impact that it had on, the victim, or it had on the community itself. And those took precedence, in my mind. Those were the things where I'm like, all right, this person was really wronged,
Right.
or this person's life was really, really put at risk, or they were really harmed. So they deserve, an increased amount of effort from me. And that, seeing them be able to get justice and seeing them be able to be made whole at times when they were victimized, to me, that was the greatest feeling. Because, you don't have a better opportunity to impact someone's life than that. And those things make you feel really satisfied in doing the job, because you're really able to positively impact someone, to help their life, to resolve a situation and a matter for them, and also, be able to help them start, moving on and get closure from that situation. And oftentimes without, you acting on it, that doesn't happen. And it just keeps adding to their grief and adding to their pain, adding to their trauma. So being able to be a part of relieving that and helping people get whole and get that piece was probably number one. On the patrol aspect, as a detective, I think that it was that, but it was more so, you are the person fully investigating it. Whereas
Right.
when you're a patrol officer, you're doing the initial investigation, right? Like when you're responding to the scene, you're doing all the emergency services. If someone's hurt, you're making sure they get all the emergency medical help that they need. You're letting everyone know about what you have. You're documenting it on the reports. But if you're not able to, close it out at that time period, the situation then goes to detectives to investigate. So as I became a detective, the secondary part of the investigation then is under my control. So that means I'm getting the reports, I'm reviewing them, and now I have an opportunity to try to do an investigation to try to close that case out. And it's all on you. You're working essentially on your own and working through your progressions to try to solve this case, to gather additional information, interviewing parties, checking cameras, and it's your job to bring this situation as a package to close it out and then bring it to court. So that court case is largely going to rely on how well you're able to provide, a good packet for court and wrap up this investigation.
Man, so detectives got the most stressful part of the whole.
I wouldn't say most stressful, but it's definitely one of the more stressful jobs, I think. And
Right.
the volume is very high, because you think about it, the detectives receive every single report that you see a patrol officer do. That's, if it's not closed out at that time period, it's going back to detectives.
Okay.
And think about how many reports are done every hour, right?
Man.
Throughout the entire city.
And they have to go through all of that.
In their particular district,
Okay.
right? So they have to review all those things, follow up, check carefully, look for evidence. Like, all these things are all things that they have to do in one case. So just watching camera footage can take your entire shift sometimes, right? So sometimes people get frustrated too, because they're like, well, you didn't get to my case yet, but they don't understand how high their case volume is.
Now I get it, because I was frustrated one time. I actually went through an incident. It's already passed.
Right.
I was actually robbed one time. And I was like, man, why did it taking so long?
Right.
Like, I was robbed. I had the camera. I recorded like the plate of, like, my dash camera recorded like the plate of the car, the people's face.
Right.
But it took so long that I even gave up on the case myself. I'm like, you know what? Let me just thank God for being alive and just keep moving forward. Right. And I hope this will never happen again.
Right.
You know,
we recommend that, if a situation like that happens, to just call the station and ask for a follow-up. You can always ask to speak to a detective.
I always
and ask
did,
for
but they
follow-up.
always tell me like, oh,
Right.
we're still looking into, and the next time they call me, they say, oh, you know what, we found this, but we can't do anything because we're not sure if that's the actual person. I'm like, you know what? Just forget it.
I get it. And here's the other thing. So investigations are tough, because I know that, when something happens, by nature, we just want results.
Right.
But I don't think a lot of people understand, how it works on our end. Like, we have certain, legal restrictions. We have to go based on, obviously, constitutional law and New York State penal law. There's certain rules that we have to abide by, and there's certain things that we need to be solid before we can move forward. And, we go based on solvability. And solvability is basically the amount of things that you have there to be able to solve that crime. So sometimes, yeah, you can have video, but does the video show the person's face, right? Is there anything that would tie an individual to that crime where you can make an assessment as to who this person is and identify them? Sometimes there's not. So people will be like, well, I have video. All right, but was the video clear? Did it show their face? Were they able to be identified based on that video, right? And if that is not there, there's not, physical evidence, there's not witnesses, then it's tough to close out that case.
Right.
So all these things have to be present in order for a case to be closed. And I think sometimes we don't realize just, how tough that is to be able to do that in addition to the amount of volume that the guys have.
Yeah, no, I get it. That's why, I was like, you know what? And also I know when it comes to things like that, you guys focus more on the cases, like, let me say someone was killed, so you guys tend to put that on top of the other cases, if I'm correct.
So we have different units that take care of different crimes, right? Okay. And so we have a homicide unit, and they take care of crimes where someone is killed or a situation where they might be close to dying. Okay. So our homicide unit will handle those particular cases, and they're looked at as that's the detectives unit that probably has the most, I don't want to say important, but the most precedence on the work that they do, because you're talking about human life, like living or dying, right? We also have a SVU unit, and they handle domestic situations and sexual cases and also child cases. Our district detectives handle pretty much a lot of everything that happens in the stations. Accidents are handled by patrol officers who are investigators, called our Accident Investigation Unit. But we do very much prioritize, and we have to triage because of the volume and the amount of things that we get, even with calls. The 911 system sets up those calls based on priority and puts them out based on how high they are in priority. So some people are like, well, I've been waiting for an hour and
That's true.
They just never came. And they think that the officer just looked at him and was like, I'm not going. But the reality of the situation is, because that just means that there are probably a lot of higher priority calls going on at that same time period.
It's Buffalo, New York. It's the second biggest city in New York.
Well, being in a city is busy, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And we have, in cities, you have the largest volume and concentration of people coming and going. Like, you think about it, I'm the chief of B District. B District is the area where you've got, think about the thousands of people that just come down for a Sabres game or a Bison's game, right? That come down to theaters, to come down to Chippewa, to Allen Street. You're talking thousands.
So you basically the chief of...
Right. So that entire area, you're responsible for that, right? So not only do you have the people who reside in that particular district, but you've also got all the people who are coming down there for other reasons to be at even the court buildings, the government buildings, the parks, the schools. You're getting a lot of people who normally wouldn't be in the city even concentrated down there, in addition to the people who reside there. So on top of that, so you've got this big influx of people. So you can imagine, as people interact with each other, obviously things are going to happen, and they report them.
Wow, man, that's heck of a job, So now let's actually go back to some of the questions that I have here, because I know there's a lot of young people that's trying to pursue that career themselves. They want to either become a police officer, a sheriff, a military officer, and so on, because there's a lot of things that they can do to serve the community.
Right.
So what are some of the most important skills for a police officer or just anybody in law enforcement to have in order to succeed and just protect and provide and just make sure the community is safe and all going?
I think, in my opinion, the biggest thing is having communication skills, probably number one. People don't realize that policing, the foundation of policing is conversation with people, right? Because that first 911 call comes from communication from a citizen. They're calling the 911 call taker, who usually works for the county, and they're conveying something that's happening at that time. That information then goes to a dispatcher. The dispatcher then puts out that particular call based on what's happening. And, they have to put that out on the air, we call it on the air, on the radio, for officers, and then they dispatch a car to that based on that information that was given by that citizen. So when the officer responds, he's listening to that information, he's responding based on the information that was put out on the radio, and now when he investigates, he's going to have to talk to the people who are on scene and try to ascertain what exactly is happening at that moment. And so your investigation is going to rest primarily on the information that you're able to obtain via conversation with this person at that time period. Also, when you're trying to advise that person, when you're trying to help someone, when you're trying to reassure someone, it's all conversation, right? So having good communication skills, I think, is number one.
Right.
And I think how well you do as an officer, often a lot of that is going to be dictated based on that. I think the second thing, in my opinion, is, probably, I think just being a good listener, right? Even though that's kind of like a sub-conversation of, communication, right? Like it's a rudimentary part of communication. You have to be able to understand information, take in information, and really let it resonate and, react based on, what you're hearing. You have to pick apart little things that people are saying, how they feel. I think observation, being able to see certain things about the situation, right? Most people, they lock in and sometimes we get tunnel vision, right? But I guess the context is in everything that you see. And there might be cues to what's happening. Someone may be saying something, but then you see something that might be to the contrary there, and you'll have to focus on both. And those things, all play a part in your investigation and your ability to be able to ascertain what happened, since you weren't there when it occurred. And I think lastly, I would say just resilience. We talked about resilience earlier, so I'll say resilience. It's a thankless job, and oftentimes, you're dealing with people at sometimes the worst and most agitated, most frustrated, most traumatic times of their life. Right. So you have to be solid, and even though you're a human being, we're all human beings, right? We're not, people have this idea like police aren't human. We are human. We have families. We have our own drama. We have our own issues. We have our own, mountains that we have to climb. Right. But it goes out the window once we put that uniform on, and now we have to proceed in the best interest of the public. And we have to do what we can to act in the interest of the public to protect people. And so no matter what you're going through personally, you've got to put on, right? You got to put on for everybody now. It's like you got to put that aside and do what's right for everyone else.
It's crazy. It's crazy how, like, you have to, like you said, once you put that uniform on, your personal, whatever that you're going through, put it to the side. Because if you allow that to kind of like mess with your head throughout your work day, right, like you said, it can mess with that resilience.
Absolutely.
Like you can lose that. You can even lose self-control, because now you're dealing with things that you shouldn't be thinking about throughout like your work days, and somebody talks to you and you give them an attitude back instead of just trying to listen to them, like you say, communication and just being patient. I think that's another thing that some people try to ask, like, because there's some police who are not patient. But in what ways can you work on your patience? And how do you guys kind of like, throughout like training, how do you guys tend to learn or get taught how to be patient in certain situations?
I think that, I don't think a certain police are impatient. I think people are impatient, right? And I think, police are people, right? We're a segment of the population, right? And I think sometimes in conversation we forget that, right? So it's easier to make the assumption when we see something negative from a police officer, police, right? As opposed to people. And I think, it doesn't come quickly to some people. I think we as a people, sometimes we make sweeping statements about a subsect, and it's a way for our brains to simplify a situation. But the reality of it is it's part of a larger conversation about human beings. But, we go through all sorts of training, like de-escalation. We have all sorts of training throughout the year. We are an accredited agency, and that means that we adhere to the best practices that they have nationally for police. And some of that is mandatory training, making sure that police officers know how to communicate, they know how to control themselves on scene. They have diversity training, they have de-escalation training, all these different things to make sure that they're aware of themselves and they're aware of how to react to stimulus outside of them. Under our former commissioner, Byron Lockwood, he was a very community-oriented commissioner. And, he very much, was a big advocate of community policing, as is the mayor, Mayor Brown. And, under their leadership, one of the things that was started was they started a body language training. A young lady who worked at Shays at the time period named Denby Duncan, partnered with the department in order to come up with this training. So it was, you had this lady who worked in the arts and worked in the community, working now with the police department to help all of our new police officers be able to be more aware of, their own body language, right, but also read the body language of the people that they're interacting with. And the purpose of it was multifaceted, but the main reason was to ensure more positive interactions with police officers on scene, and it made them more reflective of themselves as well. Right. So, we're always trying to do new things. We're always trying to throw new ripples into it. We very much prioritize community policing, community outreach. We've got, and I'm not saying it's just because I work for Buffalo, but I can tell you we've got a really, really big community outreach footprint. We were probably one of the first departments who really started embracing community policing, putting community police officers in every single district. And now it's even expanded even more towards having a neighborhood engagement team and throwing big community outreach events, having mentorship classes for kids, and I could keep going. But it's a really, really big emphasized thing in our department because we very much understand, as we said earlier, that we work for the people, and you're only going to be as successful as you can communicate and establish positive relationships with the community. We're reliant on the community. All the information that we get, to investigate something, that initial 911 call, community needs that we need to fulfill, it's all relying on our relationship with community members.
Community members. That was actually going to be my next question. It's crazy how you kind of just read my mind and just took. That was actually going to be my next question. I was actually going to ask you, speaking of community, what are some things that you guys have done so far throughout the community in order to give back or just community outreach? And you just answered it right away. So let's move on to the next thing.
There are some other things I'd like to add, though.
Let's go ahead.
All right. So,
yes, sir.
And that is a big passion of mine. Obviously, having a psychology background, coming from the inner city, so throughout my time working for the department, I've been very fortunate to be able to fulfill a lot of different roles in the department, and that was one of my favorite jobs. Working as the outreach captain, because you were able to initiate community outreach programs throughout the department, and work with the commissioner directly on creating programs that you saw were needed in the community. And as a kid coming from the community, you can only imagine how cool it is to be able to come up with your own program to positively impact the community that you lived in. That's such a cool, impactful thing, and I very much am very appreciative of my time there. And in that time period, we did a lot of great things. During COVID, we came up with something called Hero Day, because we realized a lot of the kids, the problem was at that time period, kids could not go outside and play with kids like they used to in the past. They couldn't, when they were in school, they couldn't go inside the gyms because COVID was still spreading, and you didn't want people getting sick. So we came up with a way to still do outreach for them, at each one of their locations and bring the whole entire program to them. So we started partnering with all our emergency responder organizations, like, the ambulance, like the firemen, like the National Guard, and we brought even helicopters, like Hummers, like fire trucks, everything. We created COVID safe stations for each one of the kids to visit while they were wearing masks one at a time to be able to learn about each one of the things and interact with each one of the emergency responders. That was a cool thing. Our mentorship program that we had at one of our charter schools, Charter School of Inquiry over in Edison and E District, where we actually created an entire curriculum to be able to positively impact and build these kids as leaders. So it went from, things as basic as, self-control and confidence and things like that, and went all the way up to active citizenship, entrepreneurship, financial literacy. And by the end of it, the kids really had, a lot of mastery and interest in these things that normally kids in 5th and 6th grade wouldn't have access to. Wow. So that was a really, really big program for us. And it's still going on to this day. It's my baby. I still work on it. The work that we do with Buffalo Police Athletic League, we got all sorts of programming that they do as a group, and we partner with them on everything that they do. We also have something called custom notifications, where typically, when you investigate people that have guns or have gang ties and things as young people, it's purely for punitive means, right? It's purely to investigate and arrest with charges if they did something that's wrong. But this is a program where we investigate, we track all the people that are doing something wrong, going down the wrong road, being seen with guns, getting involved in gangs. And we actually go to their houses and we try to link them with services. We talk to their moms, we talk to their dads, we talk to their family members, we talk to them, and we try to figure out, what the need is and try to link them with services from partners to be able to get rid of that need, to provide them what they need to go forward and have a better positive trajectory in life. So those are just some examples. There's one more, and it was a partnership with our district attorney's office and Dina Thompson. She actually has the Restorative Justice Coalition, which is actually right down the street. And we started a youth program because we saw how many kids were involved in stealing cars and things.
Oh man, the Kia boys and it's a lot of kids.
Right. Unfortunately, and those are pretty serious things that could result in someone getting injured or killed. Right. So the program was created. We all collaborated, and we wound up making it so that the kids would come in and do restorative circles. Community members would tell them how they were impacted by the crimes and things. We would come in and we would talk to them, and we would disclose things about our own lives and talk to them. And we would link them up with services. We'd link them up with counselors and mentors, but we also take them through role play scenarios. So they had an opportunity to understand from a police standpoint what we deal with on calls, and we as police officers got to pretend we were them. So we got to show them what we deal with, and they had to act as police officers dealing with that particular scenario so that they can get a bit of perspective. And you got that shared perspective when we did open dialogue at the end of it. So there was a lot of positive outcomes from it. Kids that normally probably wouldn't want to talk to anyone about it, especially the police, by the end of it, there's a lot of positive dialogue, and it was really, really insightful and really meaningful. So it was a lot of good work and a lot of good programs we did during that time, and I'm very proud of our department and our city for it.
Wow, that's amazing. Shout out to you guys. I mean, just giving back to the community, that's the most important thing. And that's one thing that we all want as civilians. Right. We want our police officers to be engaged. I've seen the few pictures and videos online where the police would just go in the neighborhood and play basketball with the kids. And sometimes I look at them like, man, that's what we need. Right. Because you protecting and serving the community. Right. Just get involved, and I feel like it can build a lot of trust and a lot of just respect and just the relationship to grow more and more. Right. From the civilian perspective and the police perspective. So that way we know each other. Absolutely. Because just looking at it too, the reason why I said that is because a lot of the police officers that sometimes we will come across are not from our neighborhoods. So and I feel like if they're doing that, if they're coming from let me say the suburbs to work in the city, and they're starting to get engaged and knowing the city people and knowing how they think, feel, and do things, it can avoid a lot of incidents that may go on.
And we agree with that. We have really championed diversity in the city of Buffalo. And I don't think people realize how hard we go and try to make sure that when we recruit from diverse backgrounds. And we're very, very proud of that, of how diverse we have become, as a police department. And as far as engagement, even in 2018, our department came up with a neighborhood engagement team. And if you see them, they walk around with royal blue shirts.
Oh yeah, I've seen them because I do coach kids. I do coach kids, and I've seen them actually. Oh yeah, yeah, they will come through and
absolutely, and they do exactly that, and they do it for their entire shift for 10 hours a day. They stay engaged in the community. They stay going to kids events. They go to block club events and meetings. They go to all the different community centers. They go to different parks whenever kids are playing. they take part in all the police athletic league programming and all the different sports clinics and things that they have. So so we want every police officer to view themselves as a community police officer, and we try to make sure we tell our guys to make sure that they get out there and engage. But it's nice to have a team that's doing that every single day, that we know is going to be out there building relationships and connecting with our community members. But, as I can say as a chief, we very much, want our guys to be doing that when they have time. We know we run back and forth going to emergency call, but we always say, hey, if you got time, spend some time with people.
Spend some time with people. I like that. And since we're getting closer to the end, I just want to ask you, what are some things that you like to say to the youth? I mean, because I know you went from step one where you was just playing with your friends at a young age, went to school, and you pursued trying to become a psychologist, get a PhD, have your own clinic, and start practicing your practices. And then now look at you, went from being a police officer, a patrol officer, to becoming a chief. So what are some motivational or things that you would say to the youth in order for them, for the ones that's pursuing their dreams, in order to keep that resilience, in order for them to keep going and never give up?
I think the biggest thing I could think about is to pay attention to your why. Write it down, your why. And when I say your why, be aware of that drive that you have, that passion you have, but always be tapped into your why. Like, why did you do it? Why are you driven towards it? And if you stay close to that, you're never going to go off track. You'll never fall off of your purpose. And even in decisions that you make later on, you're going to make decisions that bring you closer to that, right? And so let that thing guide you. Let that be the thing that sets up your guideposts, and be resilient. As we said, there's going to be tons of things that happen. There's going to be hurdles. There's going to be both personal, career, professional, sort of school hurdles that pop up. But follow, that gut feeling, follow that passion that you have. We all have different proficiencies. We're all good at different things.
Right.
Follow that. And don't be afraid to be different in spaces, right? We're all unique. And I think each one of these institutions progresses as we bring our unique personalities to it. It becomes a bit more different. It becomes a bit more reflective of the overall population and reflective of our unique American experiences. So, that's one thing I could say that I've been very grateful for, is that being able to bring myself to these jobs and have it reflect, not only my experience, but the experience of someone who is from my community, and then being able to take that and being able to positively impact things in this role now. And now that's something that's essentially part of what we do, of our approach permanently, of how we deal with people and what we do, and the knowledge base that we have. So these institutions progress based on our involvement. It's not separate from us. We often have this idea that government works by itself and that we don't have to do anything. We can take our hands off the wheel. This is a democracy, and we forget that. So we work for you, and we can only do what you allow us to do. If you're involved in government, that's why we really push active citizenship, like being aware when people are running for election, who are they? Who's this candidate? What's their stance on this? Are you not happy with this law? Well, let your local legislator know. You want your police to do something? Call. Call the 311 or 911 and let them know, hey, this is happening in my neighborhood. Right. I'd like to see this worked on. And being willing to work with community police officers and just be part of the overall solution. But it doesn't work if we just expect it to work without us. Right. That's why calling 911 is such an important thing, calling 311, because otherwise, how would we know what's happening and what you need unless you let us know? Right. No, so just absolutely. Not being intimidated, and I think the other thing is, once you do get hired and you get in these spaces, don't be afraid to assert yourself. Don't be afraid to give your expression of who you are and what your beliefs are and what your opinion is. And again, those things are the things that make institutions evolve and change and progress.
Amen. Thank you so much. And I hope y'all took some notes, man, because this is an important conversation, and I feel like there was a lot of game. You dropped a lot of game, not just talking about your career path or anything, but I feel like a lot of people always want to hear from someone that's doing good for themselves. Someone that's actually that have actually went through a lot of different trials and tribulations, to become who they are today. And you're the example of it. Your job is not easy.
Right.
Your job is not easy. It's a hard job, and you worked your way up. And there's more things to accomplish. The grind don't stop, like your grandfather.
Yeah.
Like your grandfather kind of like showed you. But yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate you for coming through. This was an amazing sit down with you. And I hope a lot of people that are actually gonna tune into this gets some insight on what they want to do in life. And we heard a lot of great things about police. And thank you for being honest with us. Appreciate you. But yeah, y'all go ahead and hit the subscribe button, man. Don't forget to like, comment, and share this video. This is Issy Pinchot Podcast with your one and only host, Glory Boy, here with Tommy Champion.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Bye.